In the past few months, the MMORPG genre has experienced somewhat of a renaissance. The status quo has been shaken up and the dominance of the old guard is being challenged. New studios are bringing out new games, new players are flooding in and discovering the joys of the MMO, while old players are questioning long-held beliefs about game design. Is the MMO about to have a rebirth within the gaming landscape?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. I'm Josh Hayes. The MMORPG is a fantastic genre with millions of players around the world. Players enjoy the mechanics of the MMO, creating a character, leveling, dungeons, raiding, leveling up your skills and having your own adventure online. And yet many people have been saying since around 2016 the genre has been going downhill. Is that about to change? Was it true at all? Let's have a look at the state of the genre as it is right now and see if we're going through somewhat of an MMO renaissance.
Before we begin, if you want to support the channel for free, you can like the video or sub for more MMO stuff, ring the bell for all the future notifications, and a special thank you to all those who support via Patreon or Twitch. More on how you can do this at the end. For now, let's begin. Back in February 2021, MMORPG YouTuber The Lazy Peon put out the excellent video The Absolute State of the MMORPG Genre. In the video, he laments the financial support that's been shown to other genres such as battle royales and first-person shooters, while the MMO has sadly been left behind. But why is this? Well, back in 1997, the world was introduced to Ultima Online. Then 2 years later, in 1999, EverQuest arrived, and thus began one of the greatest gaming rivalries. The MMORPG had two franchise titans, and EverQuest and Ultima actually remained surprisingly close to each other in popularity for many years. Then along came Acheron's Call to challenge them both, and while never taking the crown, it did extremely well. Then more games arrived, and the MMORPG genre had a healthy, real-world gaming meta. No one game dominated, no one style was vastly superior. The game selection was smaller than today, but the player base was stable between all of them. Then came the MMORPG boom. World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Guild Wars, Anarchy Online, Ragnarok Online, Final Fantasy XI, EVE, Toontown Online, Lineage 2, Second Life, City of Heroes. The MMORPG gold rush had begun.
Companies knew there was money to be made in the MMORPG landscape, but as of yet, the specific design structure wasn't known. Fantasy or sci-fi? Action combat or tab target combat? Player versus player or player versus environment? The meta of the MMORPG design hadn't yet been solved, and this meant there was lovely creative chaos. When there is no structure for how to design something for the biggest financial gain, then creative people just throw multiple ideas out and see what works. You have to take the risk when there's no blueprint to copy, and it's this risk that leads to fantastic, interesting, creative situations. We don't know what we're going to get. Something might work. It's the same as when an MMORPG releases a new patch or a new dungeon or a new update. Players don't know what works. We don't know what the best item to use is. We don't know what the best setup is. And it's this lovely chaos, this beauty of the unknown that allows us to be so creative. It's taking the risks that gives us the creative rewards. Everyone had been thrown into chaos. Companies didn't know what to design, and the meta of the MMO design hadn't yet been solved. This gave us so many different games.
The early to mid era of the MMORPG was similar to the early to mid era of the mobile phone. Companies were throwing some crazy designs at the wall and seeing what worked, what the public would actually respond well to. If you were a kid in the late 90s, mid 2000s like I was, you'll probably remember everyone having a different mobile phone with a different operating system and a different charging cable. It was a wild time for design. And these crazy wild situations are absolute breeding grounds for creativity. When no one knows what will work, or when you've got multiple styles all working equally well, people are driven to find unique solutions, ideas, and styles. It's a designer's paradise when the correct choice financially isn't known. And then the risks they take start to pay off. But one paid off more than the others. World of Warcraft. Slowly, one MMO emerged as the king and began to make all the money. Now, from a design standpoint, the emergence of a single dominating system means one thing. The clones are coming. When the audience is young and the design space is fresh, risk is the best business strategy because the chance of success is equal roughly everywhere. But when the audience is known, risk becomes a terrible tactic. If you want to make guaranteed money, you'll just copy what works. With Warcraft dominating and EverQuest creeping ahead of Ultima, the standard was being set. If you were a company making an MMO, you likely wanted a third-person fantasy game with classes, tab target combat, and grindy gameplay with endgame dungeons and raids as your focus. It was proven to work. The formula had been found.
One of the worst things that can happen to a creative space is the design within it becoming solved. Once you know the best set of steps to take to achieve a certain goal, you'd be a fool not to take them. In Warhammer 40k, if a certain army becomes all-powerful and all-dominant, you'd be an idiot not to play the army. In Magic the Gathering, if one deck became unbeatable, you'd want to play the deck. In any MMORPG, once the meta is known, how to play your class, you play your class in that way. It takes away the freedom and the creativity, and designing a game is no different. Once companies knew how to build an MMORPG for the maximum return on investment, everyone did that. If your goal is victory or profit, you'd be a fool not to follow the meta. This kills design. I'm not blaming World of Warcraft specifically for homogenizing the genre. If it hadn't been that one, another game would have. It just happened to be the game that found the specific combination of franchise recognition and design style that appealed to a lot of people. And now designers knew that taking risks wasn't worth it. Risking success in a chaotic landscape with everyone else also risking is potentially lucrative. Risking when you've already got a guaranteed method of success is not appealing to most companies. Over the next few years, we did indeed get some new MMOs, but most came and then went. Wildstar, The Secret World, The Matrix Online, Shadowbane, Asheron's Call 2, Star Wars Galaxies, The Lord of the Rings Online. Some of these games found minor levels of success, most of them shut down. The MMORPG was an extremely expensive genre to make, and since the majority of the player base was focused on a single game, it had a relatively low chance of giving a decent return on investment. You were unlikely to steal another game's players. The major MMORPGs that did manage to rise in power were all offering something that Warcraft didn't. RuneScape didn't require a download, Guild Wars 2 was a buy once play forever game, or they were supported by huge franchises. The Elder Scrolls Online had Skyrim, Final Fantasy XIV had Final Fantasy, and the genre settled into this stable position for a while. The 5 major MMORPGs, World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy XIV, The Elder Scrolls Online, Guild Wars 2, and RuneScape were the titans of the genre, with several smaller but still successful games floating around the edge. Star Wars The Old Republic, Neverwinter, Dungeons & Dragons Online, Lord of the Rings Online, Terra and others sitting off to the sidelines. The gold rush, at least in the MMORPG design space, was finished, and plucky young designers moved on to different, less risky genres. If you're a game development company, at this point in time you don't want to make an MMORPG. They're incredibly expensive, have a really long development time, and a very, very low chance of actually making any profit. Back when the gold rush was happening and people didn't know what would make money, it was worth it. But the research had been done, the R&D was finished, and people had discovered that a successful MMORPG took a hell of a lot of money to make. That gold rush was now happening in other games, battle royales. The mobile gaming market was making absolute strides and billions of dollars. The MMORPG genre had been solved design-wise, and that gold rush was over. Right up until it started again.
By gold rush, I mean the moment companies realised there's an excessive amount of money to be made, and over the last 6 months in the MMO world, we've seen some major movements from big companies, and some interesting additions from smaller ones. If a game is solved, there's no point making any different moves, like tic-tac-toe. Once the winning combination is known, just copy it. And this is true right up until the winning combination stops winning. World of Warcraft is falling, Final Fantasy XIV is raising, and this switch in power is a symptom of a major new era in the MMO world. Not every single MMO player wants to play a single game forever. They want to play them until they stop having fun and then move on to another one. Variety becomes the spice of life. Players want new experiences, and for the last few years this has meant players have cycled between the top 5 MMOs, occasionally trying the smaller ones, but now we seem to be reaching a player boredom boiling point. Every MMO player has tried all the top games, most of them have tried the smaller games, and the companies are realising the player base wants something new and are actually serious about playing a new game. Amazon are moving in with New World to capture the casual PvP crowd. Mortal Online 2 wants the hardcore PvP players. RuneScape Mobile wants the mobile market. Ashes of Creation is aiming to recreate that classic RPG feel. Bless Online has just released. League of Legends is making an MMO. Star Citizen is probably releasing another pre-release ship to make more money. It may one day exist, it may not, who knows.
The early days of the MMORPG boom were brought about because companies realised this new genre, the MMO, had an untapped player base and there was a lot of money to be made. Companies took risks, several companies failed, a few succeeded, and the early days were won by EverQuest, Ultima Online, Asheron's Call, World of Warcraft, RuneScape, Guild Wars. These games rose to the surface, some of them kept going for years and years after. The risk was just too big to take now. If you're a new company, making an MMO would likely bankrupt you. So the MMO sat back. Games companies enjoyed making vast amounts of profits, and players slowly became bored. The genre stagnated because it was too risky for any new company to enter. And this, ironically, made it worth entering. Because players wanted a new game. They hadn't had a new good game, in a hell of a long time. And suddenly, the money was there to be made again. The player base were crying out for a new game, and the risk suddenly became worth the reward. A healthy, unsolved meta is vital to the long-term success of anything competitive or creative. EverQuest and Ultima were so close for so many years, and this meant they both focused on being the best versions of themselves because something about them was appealing. They didn't need to follow a known formula and become gentrified. Competition leads to innovation, invention, and creation. Once Warcraft began to dominate, design became do what works and copy that, not do what we're good at or create something new. Now, with Warcraft failing, suddenly the top 5 MMOs are actually leveling out again, and this is forcing them to all focus on what they are specifically good at, not just copying a known formula, because the formula isn't working as well as it used to. We have returned to the point where risk is worth it. Renaissance means rebirth, revitalization, or a renewed interest in something. It can be a slow burn change or a dramatic shift. In most cases, it's a combination of both. In the MMORPG genre, it's the slow creeping boredom caused by multiple years of industry dominance and solved gameplay design causing the player base to wish for something new, combined with a sudden shift in the player base away from Warcraft and toward other games such as Final Fantasy, which has made companies realize the genre is being shaken up. The gold rush is here again. The risks are worth it. World of Warcraft solved MMO design for many years. As far as player counts go, clones were made to emulate the success, and a lucky few managed to survive. The genre became too much of a risk to enter. Battle Royale games made more money for less risk. Mobile gaming was far more profitable. But now the player base is bored, the power has shifted, and the companies have realised while mobile gaming is still the best choice financially, the MMORPG genre isn't completely done. It's not as solved as they thought. Companies, once again, are taking risks. I have long believed the last year has been the start of a new golden age for the MMORPG, but what do you think? Are we seeing the start of a renaissance, or will these new games fade into obscurity like so many before them, and will we sit back into the boring status quo? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much for watching. Another massive thank you to the supporters on Patreon and Twitch who keep the channel going. You can support from only £1 a month. Check the video description for links to the Patreon, Twitch, Twitter, and our Discord. And as always, have a great day.